All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I really appreciate it. We are here today to talk about the Equal Rights Amendment. I first wanted to recognize some of the members that are here, and people are coming in from the waiting room, so I'm trying to keep up with everyone. But I just wanted to recognize, first of all, the co-sponsors of the Equal Rights Amendment bill that we'll be filing next week. I'm Representative Julie Von Haefen. I represent District 36 in the North Carolina House here in Wake County. And my co-sponsors in the House are Representative Susan Fisher, who will be speaking today, Representative Evelyn Terry, who could not be here today, and then Representative Carla Cunningham, who's also on the call. And then in the Senate, our lead sponsor is Senator Valerie Foushee, who will be speaking today, as well as their co-sponsors in the Senate, Senator Natasha Marcus and Senator Natalie Murdoch. Thank you all for joining us today. And we also have a lot of members from the General Assembly here in support of the Equal Rights Amendment. I was going to try to name everyone, but I don't know if I'll get to everyone. I see Representative Rachel Hunt. I see Senator Sarah Crawford. I see Senator Mike Woodard, Senator Kirk Deviere, Representative Carolyn Logan. Forgive me if I don't catch everyone. Maybe at the end I will circle back so I can look through the participant list. But thank you so much, all my colleagues, for supporting this important piece of legislation, and thank you to the media for joining us today. As you all know, the Equal Rights Amendment is something that we have been trying to ratify here in North Carolina for many years. I was lucky enough in my freshman session last year in 2019 to be one of the primary sponsors of this bill, and I'm really proud to sponsor it again this session. Now that we have Democratic control of the White House and of Congress, I'm even more positive that we will make really significant progress on the ERA this year. It's very exciting. And I know that Carol Jenkins is going to be talking about that and the national picture of the ERA at this point. So I hope that, I know my colleagues here on the call support it, but I hope all the colleagues in the General Assembly will support the right of every woman in our country to constitutional equality. So first I want to go ahead and introduce my colleague, Senator Valerie Foushee, as like I said, is one of the other lead sponsor of the bill in the Senate. Senator Foushee.
Thank you, Representative Von Haefen. I am Senator Valerie Foushee, and I represent District 23 in the Senate, Orange and Chatham counties. And so I want to first thank you all for being with us here today. I am excited to be here with my colleagues and other advocates, hoping that the third time, at least in my tenure, is a charm. Truly, it is time, I would say past time, to move forward in ensuring equal rights for women in this great state and in our nation. So I say today, ERA now. Yesterday's inauguration was historic on several fronts. Of paramount importance was the swearing in of the nation's first woman vice president. Evident that women are breaking barriers and cracking ceilings, glass and otherwise, contributing to the progress, prosperity, and the preservation of the principles that make this a great nation. That our faces are present in more spaces and places than ever before. Yesterday's historic event reminded us that our nation was founded on the principle that all, not just men, are created equal. For me, passage of this proposed legislation and the subsequent ratification of this amendment will signal bipartisan agreement that as North Carolinians and as Americans, we believe in equal rights for all. It is time to guarantee equal pay, equal access, and equal opportunity to everyone. And I would remind you that it's just been a little over 100 years that women were granted the right to vote. We know that laws can be subject to political whims, that they can be changed, weakened, or repealed. It is imperative at this time that these rights are enshrined without expiration dates, that don't have to be reauthorized annually. Now is the time for our state and federal constitutions to reflect and protect the rights of women. Passing this amendment will provide a clearer judicial standard for cases of sex discrimination. It is my hope that we indeed have bipartisan support to pass this important bill and join the other 38 states that have already acknowledged the need to guarantee the rights of women in all aspects of our lives. So again, thank you for being here with us. And now I turn it over to my friend and colleague, Representative Susan Fisher.
Thank you, Senator Foushee. It's really nice to see everybody on the call today. I am Susan Fisher. I represent District 114, which is a portion of Buncombe County. I'm beginning my 9th term in the North Carolina House. And yes, 3rd time has to be the charm, Senator Foushee. Since 1923, almost 100 years have passed without the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. North Carolina is currently one of 12 states which has not yet declared that women are due the very same rights established for men at the birth of the Constitution. More specifically, the ERA would guarantee equal legal rights for all American citizens, regardless of sex. Protections against domestic violence and sexual harassment would be required to be granted by the states. Protections against workplace pregnancy discrimination would be granted. Federally guaranteed equal pay would be granted. Many who are against the ratification of the ERA believe there are already enough laws in place designed to afford women these protections, such as the Violence Against Women Act and Equal Pay Act. However, the interpretation of these laws may vary between courts, making the ratification of the ERA crucial for language that guarantees these protections be uniformly interpreted and applied. Our nation has been devastatingly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Over 400,000 lives have been needlessly lost, with 8,000 of those being our own North Carolinians. Unemployment rates have risen as a direct result of the pandemic, with many women-dominated industries taking a harder hit than others. This has resulted in women leaving the workforce at rates that are twice that of men, with the New York Times dubbing this recession as a she-cession. Their data from April of 2020 showed the highest unemployment rates for women of color. Many of these women worked in fields that were underpaid and undervalued, leaving these women without a financial cushion when unemployment heightened. Ratifying the ERA will guarantee equal and fair pay so that women everywhere will have equal opportunities as the workforce begins to recover. 2 bills ratifying the ERA were introduced, one in each of the House and Senate chambers during the North Carolina General Assembly legislative session in 2019. To date, neither bill has been brought to a vote. This year, we are determined to change that. As the late Justice Ginsburg said of the US Constitution, quote, "I can't point to a provision that says explicitly men and women have equal rights and obligations under the law," end quote. It is time we add this provision. We are fortunate to have allies championing this cause in North Carolina, 2 of whom are with us today. It's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Lori Bunton, co-president of the ERA North Carolina Alliance. Lori is a retired pharmaceutical director and longtime activist for women's rights. She spent nearly 28 years working in established companies as large as Eli Lilly and in startup biotech companies. Lori has served on various nonprofit boards through the years, including the North Carolina Alliance for Healthy Communities and the North Carolina National Organization for Women. She volunteers with the Durham Dress for Success as a career coach. She currently serves as co-president for the ERA-NC Alliance, where she has been a board member for 4 years. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you, Representative Fisher. The ERA-NC Alliance is a nonprofit, nonpartisan alliance of 13 women's organizations across North Carolina. We were founded in 2016 with a singular purpose: to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment in North Carolina. We've worked with legislators over the last 4 years to introduce ERA bills in the North Carolina General Assembly. Sadly, the bills have never even received a committee hearing. I stand here today with these female legislators 100 years after women finally won the right to vote. We recently made history when we inaugurated the first female vice president of the United States, a momentous occasion, but also an ironic one. The person holding the second highest office in the land is not fully represented in our country's most sacred document, the US Constitution. There are over 4.2 million women in North Carolina, and none of them have full equality in the US Constitution or the North Carolina Constitution. Before the pandemic, North Carolina women earned an average median income $8,600 less per year than men. At that rate of progress, it suggests that women of North Carolina will not enjoy equal pay until 2060. 38 state governing bodies have ratified the ERA, acknowledging that gender should be a suspect class in the eyes of the law, as race, religion, and national origin are. Ratifying the ERA will help struggling families by providing rightful equal pay laws. According to the Status of Women in North Carolina Employment and Earnings Report, if working women were paid the same as comparable men, men who are the same age, have the same level of education, work the same number of hours, and have the same urban-rural status, the average earnings of increase for women would be $6,628, equivalent to a raise of over 19%. Added up across all the working women in the state, the increase would amount to $15.6 billion, equaling 3% of North Carolina's gross domestic product in 2016. The increase in earnings would reduce the poverty rate among working women by more than half, while impacting the income of the entire family. In high school, I argued for the Equal Rights Amendment for myself. On behalf of women like me, I now argue not just for myself, but for my daughters, my granddaughter, and for all women to be recognized as equal in the Constitution of our great state and country. I ask our North Carolina General Assembly, how much longer must women wait? Equality is spelled E-R-A. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Carol Jenkins, President and CEO of the ERA Coalition and the Fund for Women's Equality, where she has served as a board member since its inception in 2014. I could spend the next 15 minutes just citing all of Carol's many accomplishments, being an author, recipient of the 2017 Sackler First Award, which is given to women who are pioneers in their field, and an anchor and correspondent for WNBC TV in New York for 25 years. Along with the ERA Coalition, she is a former chair and current board member of Amaranth Health Africa USA, an arm of the largest NGO in Africa, where she's engaged in efforts to support health programs for African women and girls. And now I'd like to turn the podium over to Carol Jenkins.
Lori, thank you so much. I'm thrilled. I cannot tell you how excited I am to hear you all talking about the ERA, because that everybody who knows me, knows that if they say hello to me, I'm going to tell them about the Equal Rights Amendment and why we need it. I love being in North Carolina with you, Lori, and Marina and Jimmy and Representative Cunningham, who actually came to New York for one of our events when we were discussing women of color in the Equal Rights Amendment, something that we very much want people to understand, that it is for every single woman in this country, no matter what color. I want to thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about equality, most specifically about the Equal Rights Amendment to the United States Constitution, which would prohibit discrimination based on sex in every state. Many people think it's much more complicated than that. You know, it actually doesn't say, let's put women in the Constitution. It only says you cannot discriminate based on sex. I want to thank you to all of the women and men of North Carolina, the legislators who are here today, and the others working on that, the advocates working on both the federal and the state levels, essential to achieve true lived equality. We believe in a 50-state strategy. We can't understand why any state in the United States of America would not support the idea of equality for women, equality for all. The ERA Coalition is comprised of over 120 now, we're growing, national and local organizations across the country, including the hardworking and very effective ERA North Carolina Alliance. We represent millions of people who support the idea that we cannot continue the egregious acts of discrimination that have resulted in women being the poor and the unprotected of our country. America has grown rich and prosperous by using women as its cheap labor, women who cannot feed, house, or educate their children. It amounts to scandalous discrimination that must now be stopped. And we're here to stop it with the Equal Rights Amendment. We've tried everything else, trillions of dollars and timeless energy to correct this imbalance. And it will not be corrected until we go to the core of the problem, where the origins of systemic sexism and racism reside. And that is in our Constitution. We must have fundamental constitutional recognition and equality for those who were not included in the original concept of our country. We just weren't thought of. The framers of our Constitution, though, understood that there might have to be fixes along the way, which is what we call the ERA. It's a fix. And they were right. Our Constitution has been amended 27 times to grant necessary rights and privileges. Article 5 stipulates some pretty stringent requirements for amending the Constitution, passage in Congress, and ratification by 38 states. That's a pretty tall order, especially looking at it from this current point of view. Congress passed the ERA, though, in a spectacularly bipartisan vote in 1972. And as of January 27th of 2020, last year, when the state of Virginia became the 38th state to ratify it, the ERA has met those requirements. That's our argument. We've already fulfilled what the Constitution requires of us. The archivist, however, of the United States, we always say, poor man, he's the chief librarian, but it's his clerical responsibility to publish amendments. And he has, on instruction from the previous administration's Department of Justice, declined to do so. We are now urging President Biden to act quickly to instruct the archivist to publish the amendment. As we say, it's not quite this easy, but it's almost as easy as a phone call. Dear archivist, please attach the amendment to the Constitution. The ERA Coalition is submitting a letter to the president signed by more than 150 organizations, requesting him to act swiftly within the first 100 days of his tenure. In the courts, we are also supporting the attorneys general of the 3 final states to ratify, Nevada, Illinois, and Virginia, who have sued the archivist to compel him to publish. And we are supporting efforts in Congress to remove the time limit. It used to be called a deadline, but it really wasn't a deadline. It was a suggested time limit included in the introduction of the amendment. It wasn't anything that any of the states voted on. As we gather here right at this minute, the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives have jointly introduced as a day one priority. You can imagine how we felt when we got the call that this was day number 1 and women had moved up the ladder in consideration in the United States Congress. It will be a bicameral and bipartisan bill, a joint bill to remove the time limit on the ERA. And you might remember that we did this in the House last year, but these bills have to be passed in both houses in order to take, so to speak. So the House and the Senate are as a number 1, day 1 priority, introducing a joint resolution to remove the time limit from the ERA. This is what it says: resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that notwithstanding any time limit contained in House Joint Resolution 208, this was back in the 92nd Congress when we did this, as agreed to in the Senate on March 22nd, 1972, that's when they passed it, the article of amendment proposed to the states in that joint resolution shall be valid in all intents and purposes as part of the Constitution ever ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states. So as you can tell, we are there already. The ERA Coalition joined the sponsors in the Senate and the House of Representatives in their news release today. In the Senate, the lead sponsors are Ben Cardin of Maryland, a Democrat, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, a Republican. In the House, the leaders are Democratic California Congresswoman Jackie Speer and Republican Congressman Tom Reed of New York. And what the coalition statement to this really heroic, we think, move today, bold on the part of and for the fates of the women who live in this country. What we say is this is a historic and monumental step forward for all 94% of Americans who agree that women should have equal rights in our Constitution. In a time of deep division, here is something that we can all agree on, that there can be no time limit on equality. We thank Senators Cardin and Murkowski and Representatives Speer and Reed for their bipartisan leadership and tireless commitment to equality. Against this backdrop of national turmoil and pain, today shows that progress is still possible. And the Equal Rights Amendment, who would have thought it, is a great unifying opportunity to secure a more equal future for everyone in this country. And I thank you so much for the invitation, for being here with you today.
Thank you so very much, Carol. So now we are going to open the floor for questions from members of the press. If you do have a question, please navigate to the bottom right-hand corner of your screen and you'll see the reaction button. When you click on that, you'll have the ability to raise your hand. I'll be going through the list of folks who have raised their hand and I'll be keeping a queue. Once you've raised your hand to ask a question, I will then allow you to unmute and please state your name, your organization, and the panelists you're directing your question to before asking your question. You may also put that you intend to ask a question in the chat.
While we're waiting for our questions, I just want to acknowledge some of my other colleagues who've joined our press conference today in support of the ERA bill. I think I've seen Representative Majid, Representative Butler, Representative Gill, Representative Dahl, Representative Belk, Representative John, Representative Carney join us since we started, and also Senator Muhammad and Senator Mayfield. So thank you so much for joining us. I think we have a first question.
And Bill, I believe I've just asked you to unmute.
Thank you very much. My name is Bill O'Neill. I represent WXII TV in the Triad. And my question is to the lawmakers here, is there any indication that there is a path to victory in getting this thing passed this time in the legislature where it has failed in the past? Thank you.
Well, I will start. I am always hopeful that every biennium that we will have a chance to have those bills heard that we introduce, or those resolutions heard that we introduce. I can tell you that we have very strong legislators around this resolution. Representative Von Haefen has really led the charge, and I believe that this is the year. If we can hope for any tempering of this legislature by what happened yesterday in history, that we will have a chance to have this heard. I remain hopeful. That's all I can say, but it is difficult to tell what the leadership will do in this session.
And I would add that if we don't try, then we don't advance. And so it is my goal to do the work, to make those conversations such that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle realize that this is not just a bipartisan issue, but it is an issue that can unify us, not just as women, but as North Carolinians all together. So I'm a person who believes that you have not because you ask not. So I plan to ask, and I plan to ask regularly until we indeed get this accomplished.
Do you have any other questions, Hudson?
I believe I see one from Jimmy. And Jimmy, I've asked you to unmute. Gary, I see your question. I'm getting to you on 1 second. Okay, Gary, you have been asked to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Gary Robertson with Associated Press. I say this understanding the passion you have about this issue, and I understand why you want to support it, but isn't there a mootness issue right here in the sense of, in your view, 38 states have ratified it, so enough to meet the 3/4 requirements? Isn't this really just going to be an issue that will be settled either in the courts or in Congress? And so can you describe why it's still necessary, you believe, that North Carolina needs to act on this when, again, it seems like that the issue is going to be, are the 38 states ratified or not? Thank you.
Well, if I can say on part of the coalition that we are thrilled that North Carolina is pursuing this, and with the commitment, I think that that you all can make it happen. As I stated, we believe that there should be 50 states. There should not be any state in the United States of America that says flatly, which is what a rejection of the ERA would be, that women do not deserve equality. As you may know, there are some states who have said that they would like to rescind their support. Our legal scholars tell us that that is not likely to be granted. But in the event that any one should win, because it really hasn't been tested in court in quite this way, we want to make sure that we've got the 39th, 40th, and 50 states to compensate for anything that may happen down the road. But I leave it to the persistence of the North Carolina women and men who are insisting on becoming the 39th state. We would love that number to continue to answer that question.
Hi, thank you so much, Carol. On behalf of the ERA-NC Alliance, we do get asked that question quite often. Why are we still pursuing this when we've had our 38 states? And there are several reasons. One is a reminder that the 19th Amendment, the right to vote, that was ratified 100 years ago, North Carolina did not ratify that amendment until 1971. We don't want to wait another 50 plus years to see North Carolina ratify something as simple as ordinary equality for the women in the state. And this would send a very powerful message, as Carol said, to all women and men in this country, that 51% of the population is equal under the eyes of the law and in the highest document in our land.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Hudson?
I'm not seeing any further hands. If anyone has any additional questions, please go ahead and put that in the chat.
Okay, it looks like we've answered all the questions. Again, we want to thank you everyone so much for joining, whether you're media or a colleague from the General Assembly or some of our advocate partners. As I think everyone has said, we realize that, you know, we have a really great chance now federally to pass the ERA. But for me, it's still so important to make sure that North Carolinians know that this is an important issue to legislators. It's an important issue to women all across our state. And it's something that can really bring us together. Like I think Carol said, this is something that is supported, you know, in both whether you're conservative or you're a liberal, across all, you know, races, across all genders. This is something that can really unite us. And I feel like we need to keep pushing in North Carolina to make sure that people realize that this is an important issue and it will affect so many women, especially now during the pandemic. So thank you all for joining us today. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew we are having a town hall tonight. And I believe that was included in some of the media information, and Carol Jenkins will be joining us at that as well as Jimmy Cochran Pratt, who's the other president of the North Carolina Alliance. So if you, I would love for everyone to join us for that again tonight. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.